Welcome to Forum 360 on Fusion, your PBS channel. This is Leslie Ungar, your host today. Thank you for joining us on our global outlook with a local view. Campy Russell, Cavalier legend and now Director of Alumni Relations and pregame and postgame guy, returns to Forum 360 for a record-breaking appearance. He continues the tradition with us of reviewing the past season and helping us understand the current roster and the upcoming season. Over the more than 12 years I have interviewed Campy, I have asked him some of the same questions and some different questions, like, what was it like getting a ring is not a question I could ask every year. Never before have I had to ask, did you see it coming with LeBron going to LA? Or do you think the Cavs will get back in the playoffs? Campy Campanella, a Michigan native, played for Cleveland and he played for the New York Knicks. A very wise and articulate soul, whether he is talking about shooter, scorer, team dynamics, or life. I look forward to his next pearl of basketball and life wisdom. Welcome, Campy, who we all know is all in.
Well, thank you, Leslie. You said 12 years?
It's more than 12 years, Campy.
More than 12 years? It's amazing because I came here in 2001, and now here it is 2018 going into 19, and wow.
And you know,
a great relationship.
What is even more amazing, I have a picture in my office the first year that you did the show, and I am still wearing that jacket that I wore the first year. That's maybe even more amazing than how many years. But
yes.
I see that picture every day.
Okay, great.
Every day. So let's look back before we look forward, okay?
Gotcha.
Okay. Did the Cavs falling to the Warriors again surprise you in last year's finals?
I would say, for the most part, I would say no. And I think the reason why I would say that is just because of the fine-tuned machine that this Warriors team was, and then, or is, even today as we speak. Then the fact of, I would say, maybe not having Kyrie Irving as being a part of what he brought to this team. I think those were the two factors. You know, the Warriors just being a much more fluid team, a team that was together on both ends of the court, offensively and defensively. And then I would say, you know, not having that other special talent that went along with LeBron as well as Kevin Love. So I think that was really one of the factors that I thought.
Okay, before I go down the Kyrie road, and not to put JR out there to dry, but let's say he doesn't make that mistake. Is that going to change the outcome? If you change the outcome of one game, would that have changed the outcome?
Well, it could have, but you know, I think that's the beauty of sports. You know, most of the time, you know, you can make a key blunder, mistake, whatever you want to call it, and it can cost you, you know, greatly. But, you know, I think everybody put this on JR, you know, but I think there was a lot of different things that, if you look back at it in retrospect, a lot of different things could have happened.
Well, let's just talk about those different things, okay? I understand we can't know the road not traveled, but if you had to guess, would things have been different if Kyrie was on that team last spring when I walked a half a mile at 3 o'clock in the morning in Tel Aviv to watch the Boston Cavalier series? Would things have been different if Kyrie had stayed?
With the Cavaliers? I would like to think, you know, just based upon the impact that he brought to our team and how impactful he is as a player. In my view, I would say, you know, that he was that big of a cog in what we did, that I definitely believe that could have definitely helped us, having him with our.
So do you remember where you were when you got the news that Kyrie wanted out?
No, no, I don't. I really
Did
don't.
it surprise you? Do you remember? Did it surprise
Well,
you?
you know, anytime there's a movement of a high-profile,
Mm-hmm.
talented person like that, it always catch you off guard, particularly if there's a lot of things that was building up to it. But it was definitely a surprise because of, again, the impact that he had on our team.
You know, just this morning, as we tape this, the Ryder Cup was just this past weekend,
Yes.
golf in Europe. And listening to my sports radio, they said this morning that anyone that Tiger plays with, he diminishes their skills.
That's
And
interesting.
Yes. And I thought that was interesting because my dad used to say that if you play with someone better than you will play better. So I thought it was so interesting that they're talking about professionals that allow playing with a certain person to diminish their skills. So would you talk as...
That's interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, it's interesting from the standpoint of, you know, they're almost like targeting someone. And in this case, Tiger, saying that he diminishes someone's skills. I mean, how do you diminish someone's skills, particularly in an individual sport? I can see it
Well,
happening.
but I think, do they combine, when they're in pairs in the Ryder Cup, do they combine those scores? I'm not sure how that works.
Neither am I right off the bat, but to me, it's kind of hard for me to diminish someone's skill in an individual sport.
Well, let's
In
look
a
at...
team sport, maybe,
Okay.
but in an individual
Let's
sport,
look
no.
at
It's left
team
up to that
sports.
individual.
From either a player or now that you observe, tell us from a basketball player's standpoint, is it hard to play with LeBron, and why is it hard to play with LeBron? And I would say not even LeBron, but I would ask the same thing. Is it hard to play with a Kobe? Was it hard to play with a Michael? Is it hard to play with someone whose talents may be more gifted than yours?
Well, I guess you would have to look at that individual. And I would say, if you were speaking to me as a player on it, then I would say it wouldn't be, you know, because I just believe that, you know, the more that you can bring to a team yourself with your skill sets, the better it is for everybody. You know, when you start to just acquiesce to that person or whoever, and you don't put your own skills out there within the system, then it can really hurt the entire team. It's not necessarily pointed at one person, but again, you have to be able to carry the load that you have. And in a team situation, the more skilled guys you have, in my opinion, who have multiple skill sets that can do a lot more things out there on the floor, they're not so much dependent on a Campy Russell or on a LeBron James or on anybody. They can stand on their own, and consequently, generally, you're going to have a much better fluid team in that type of situation.
You know, as a communication coach, I always tell someone that you can't let someone else take your spotlight, that you've got to shine.
Right, right.
But it seems like, you know, as an observer, that it can be hard to play with a great player. It's a different challenge than playing with good players.
Well, again, you know, I think it just goes back to that individual, you know, in terms of what they're willing to give up, or whether they even have the skill sets to not only to even help that great player.
Well, let's look at some individuals. At first glance, at least to me, who's just, you know, a sports junkie, not an expert like you, but at first glance, the players in place of Kyrie seem pretty good. What went wrong so fast with Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Derrick Rose, D. Wade? What went wrong?
It's kind of, you know, to me, I think is when you look back at all those guys, whether it was Isaiah, Jay Crowder, and Derrick Rose, you know, they all came from different systems. And a lot of times it takes a while for you to kind of get acclimated with the system that you're playing under. And because of that, there's going to be a lot of bumps and bruises and bruised egos, and a lot of different things is going to occur because of that. So to me, I just look back at it, you know, that a lot of it just had to do with the different systems that they all came from, and they struggled with trying to get all that other stuff out of their minds, and now trying to get into the system that the Cavaliers had that Coach Lou put in place. And a lot of times, it happens over time, but you have to be very patient with that.
Yeah, which is hard to do when the
Yes,
season.
particularly when there's a lot of great expectations.
So have you been around the current roster enough to be able to comment? We've talked in other years about chemistry and how you can't kind of make it happen.
Right.
But have you been around the current roster to be able to talk at all about the chemistry that you observe?
It's kind of hard to say right now, Leslie, and a lot of it just has to do with just so early. I mean, they've only had maybe 3 or 4 or 5 practices thus far, and for the most part, I've been just about at all of them. But it's kind of hard to kind of say, really, because chemistry is a funny thing. We talk about it all the time. You may these are the 5 guys that are going to be out there, and this is ones that you're committed to, but then something happens, whether a guy gets hurt or the coach make a substitution, and all of a sudden there's a big jump. And then when he put the other guy back in there, it goes back to where it was. And then that's the time, to me, that the coaches start making different changes because of just of how these 5 guys played together, and they're playing together as one on both ends of the court.
So how different, if it is different, how different is Coach Lou's job going to be this year than it was his first? His first year as head coach, he was a half year. He came in January.
Right.
Then he had 2 full seasons as head coach, but he had LeBron. So how different is his job going to be with this younger kind of roster than it was his first 2 years?
Well, I'm sure it's going to be somewhat different, but I think the thing that coach is going to bring is the consistency of how he is, the consistency of his system offensively and defensively. And I think coaches now has I'm going to say a better understanding of even some of the guys that he has, even though there's a lot of new guys now and and LeBron is not here anymore. But I see Coach really doing a great job of getting these guys to play at a high level, and I think that's going to be key. I think Coach is going to do a good job of developing these young guys that we have, because we have not been in this position before where we are a team of, I'm going to use the word, we got a better combination of players. We got a lot of young guys, we got some good solid mid-age guys, and then we have some very good veterans. So I just think he put himself in a position now to have a good combination of players, and I really think that he's going to take full advantage of the personnel that he has now, and he's going to definitely take full advantage of the system that he has put in place. So I see Coach being a much better coach going forward, even though some people it may not show up as in the record, but I think it will definitely show up as to how these guys are making incremental steps to get better. And I think as we go forward, we're going to see that these young guys, or this whole combination of all the guys that we have, that they're going to come together and be a very good basketball team.
And as you watch games, whether it's, when you're watching a game, and I'm sure you're also watching the other coach, you're also watching the other players, what's the difference? Do you see coaches that are good, practice coaches that are good, at all week when there isn't a game, but maybe the game isn't their strength? Or do you see coaches that are really good at being game day coaches and maybe aren't as good at practice? Or if you're good, are you good?
I think the thing is, I think they all are who they are. I don't know if there's a such thing as a good practice coach and a bad game practice. I mean, I don't see that. I just think, I just look at them as good coaches, guys who have been around for a while, who understand their system, understand the players that they have, understands the, I'm going to say, the weakness and the strength of their opponents. They understand situational basketball. And Coach Lou, as well as a lot of the coaches throughout our entire league, have that same mentality of just knowing what they have to do. There's no such thing as a good practice coach and a good game day coach. to
Good.
me.
You
I
heard
think
it.
it's a
Great.
situation that
Great.
they bring it and put it out there, put their game plan, and they follow their game plan, and they react to situations that occur in that particular game.
Today we are talking with living legend, Cavalier legend, Campy Russell. A look at the past season, and now we're looking at the upcoming current season. Before we do that, I want to ask you about Popovich. What makes Popovich the saint of coaches that he's made out to be?
Well, I think he's a great coach, number one. He's always had great personnel. He has a great system that allows people to grow in their system, and he picks guys that have great skill sets. He don't necessarily pick guys that are just one-dimensional basketball players. You look at his team, most of those guys have good skill sets overall. And it doesn't hurt to have a Tim Duncan or David Robinson, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, and all those other many players that have come through that San Antonio system. But
So
I think
let
it
me
all
ask
goes
you,
through the
if
system.
if I paid you $1 million and you had to guess why one of his upcoming stars wanted to leave that system, what would you guess?
Who are you referring to? I guess that would be my first question.
I'm referring to the player that's now in Toronto.
Oh, Kawhi?
Uh-huh.
I have no idea, what that was about, but I know Kawhi Leonard is an outstanding basketball player. He's always been a very good guy. I mean, you never read anything about him in the papers, anything like that. So what happened there, I have no idea.
Okay, no guesses. So,
None.
first interview with you, long time ago, you talked about the difference between shooters and scorers. I still remember it, and I still repeat it to this day. It was fascinating to me. So name one player on today's roster that you think is a scorer and one player that you think is a shooter.
On our current team?
Yep.
To me, I would say right off the bat, wow, it's kind of hard to, really, Leslie, right at this particular point, just thinking about our roster and how it is, I would say, obviously, when you talk about a shooter, you have to say Kyle Korver, because he's one of the best shooters in the history of our game, because of the way he can fill it up and work within his system that he's in, and outstanding shooter. In terms of a scorer on our team, I'm not really sure. I would say probably, that's a toughie, but I would think right off the bat, I would say Clarkson is somewhat of a combination of that. A great shooter, but he can score the basketball primarily because he can get to the rim, he can create for his own shots, and he can create for himself. So I would say probably Clarkson, and maybe I would include Jetty in that area too, because Jetty is an outstanding talent. And I think he's only going to get better as he grow and mature and get stronger and understand our system. And but I really love his basketball game, and he's what I would say is a scorer, not necessarily just a flat-out shooter.
So if I text you like in January and say, okay, now that you've watched them, who's a scorer, you'll know why I'm asking.
I definitely can probably, I know I would be able to tell you even more so now. But another guy that comes to mind is a combination of that, of shooter and scorer, is probably Rodney Hood. He's an untapped talent that can really do a lot of things down on the floor in terms of just flat out shooting the ball, as well as being able to score it because of his size, speed, and quickness.
And when you say untapped because there wasn't room on the roster for him. Why is he untapped?
Well, just untapped because he just got here. He hasn't gotten completely emerged into our system. Okay. Where he knows where everything is coming from, and he can just finally feel himself where he can just open up and be the talent that he can be. And I believe that being here in Cleveland will give him that opportunity.
So tell us, when you are watching a game or commenting on a game, do you comment as a fan or do you comment as a Cavalier? because you certainly have more inside knowledge than we do. You know, every fan has 1,000 opinions, but we have about that much knowledge of having played the game or current information. So when you're commenting, are you a fan or are you doing it as your job?
Well, I'd say for the most part, I'm doing it as a former player, a guy who understands the game. I don't, you know, fans, and I think you just said it really well when you said, you know, fans are just, for the most part, fans. They're fanatics. They want to be a part of what they see.
Yeah, they get up at 3 o'clock in the morning in a strange country.
Exactly,
and
in
walk
Israel,
half a
right.
mile to watch playoff game. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But overall, that's
Good. I'm glad it was
Yeah,
a tough question.
yeah,
I'm glad of
yeah.
that. So while that was tough, tell us why, in addition to winning, why does it seem like the Warriors are always having fun?
I think it's the makeup of their team, and they just got in my view, just a good sense and feel for each other. You know, and I think that is that puts you in a position to win games when you got a real good feel for each other, and you have talent. And they have a great talent, they have a great system, and they all appears to me to be playing for each other and not necessarily for yourself, but they're playing as a team on both ends of the court.
So let me ask this way. Aside from the Warriors, are there any other teams that come to mind that follow that same criteria?
There are some. You know, I think you have to look at the Boston Celtics. You know, they do a great job of playing within the system that they have, and they have talent also. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of talent. When you look at, I'll say an interesting team that's an up-and-coming interesting team, mm-hmm. I think, and that is the Indiana Pacers. For some reason, I just like their team, the makeup of their team, and how they all come to play, and they play really hard, and they're giving it all the time. But in terms of anybody being close to the Warriors, in terms of their personnel and how they play the game and how they get it done on both ends of the court, there's still some teams have to have a way to go.
Many players have donned the gold and maroon of the Cavs, but you remain one of the most popular players. Even though you left Cleveland for New York City as a Knick, but when the Cavs did win the ring, not all former players got a ring, but you got a ring. You remain popular with fans. What can mere mortals learn from your popularity and how you've navigated your career?
It's kind of hard for me to say because I think it's just, I guess the best way I can put it is it's just part of who I am in terms of how I'm approachable, and I think that goes a long way of being approachable. You know, I think when you are not approachable, I think it could rub up people the wrong way, and consequently, you could get a lot of bruises because of that. But I would definitely say I'm not the most popular Cavalier. I think that's Austin Carr. But to me, I just think my accessibility, the fact that I've always been a part of the community, I've always been a part of people, that I'm approachable, that I think I make myself available to people. So I think that may have a lot to do with it.
I've got about a minute or so, so I'm going to ask you for 1 or 2 word answers. Okay? The last game you actually played?
Professionally?
Mm-hmm. Or just the last time you played a whole game. Do you still play?
No. Oh, no.
I mean, just for fun? Pick up?
No.
Nothing?
Well, here. The best way I can answer that question is I decided years ago that the day that I turned 50, I was not playing basketball ever again. And the reason why I say that is, and I tell people this all the time, because nothing good can happen to you playing basketball after 50 years old, because your mind still believes you can play, but your body is shouting, if you do this, I'm going to hurt you. So I stopped playing at 50 years old.
So you did?
Yes.
Okay. Your most irrational fear?
I don't think it's irrational. I think it's the fear of height.
Okay. Your biggest superstition?
I don't.
You're not superstitious? You didn't have to put on your uniform a
No,
certain
no,
way and all of that?
no.
Your last guilty pleasure?
Wow, my last guilty pleasure. That's a tough one too. I can't begin to answer that because my last guilty pleasure.
Mine's always chocolate. And the last one, your last do-it-yourself. Are you a do-it-yourself for your last do-it-yourself project?
I do a lot of things myself. I cut my own grass.
Think about that as you're driving by that you might be seeing Campy cutting his own grass.
I do it all the time.
Thank you for joining us today on Forum 360. This has been Leslie Ungar, your host on your Fusion channel. I say it each year I interview Campy Russell, Cavalier legend. He is a wise and articulate soul. Over the years, he has shared his thoughts on LeBron wearing that Yankees hat, his leaving, his coming back, team chemistry. He tried to show me the pick and roll. Remember the points Campy has talked about for this upcoming season. Thank you for joining us on Forum 360.
Forum 360 is brought to you by Electrical Impulse Communications, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, an anonymous donor, the Jewish Community Board of Akron, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Blue Green, and Forum 360 supporters.